All right, so tonight, thank you everyone for joining the AWS Portsmouth user group. Tonight's presentation is From Zero to AWS Hero. We have Denis Dyack. Is that, yeah? I should have asked before the intro, but we've got Denis here with us. We got his Twitter handle there. I believe you're an AWS hero, and we will see a little bit more about that. As always, check us out online, Twitter, Slack. And thank you to all of our sponsors, Liberty Mutual, Seaglass Technology, O'Reilly Media, and AWS, of course. Thank you they'll be the ones that are sponsoring the giveaways. Tonight we have some AWS compute credits. So if you stick around and fill out the survey, we will be raffling off a couple of those. But again, tonight talking about From Zero to AWS Hero with Denis here, founder of Apocalypse Studios. Little bit of during the COVID lockdown, you guys are going to be talking about some of the pipeline strategies that you've done, talking about some of the cloud first initiatives that you guys are looking for, and how you got to where you are today. So Denis, feel free to take it away.
Excellent. Thank you for the kind introduction. I really appreciate it. So I am going to, I'm going to start sharing the screen. Let me see if I can do it here. Yes. All right. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can see the screen.
Excellent. Okay.
Amazing graphics.
Oh, thanks. Hopefully today everyone will get something out of this. It is my hope that I can present not only some fun and interesting ideas, but some things that I feel are particularly provocative when it comes to thinking about cloud technologies and, quite frankly, the ramifications on society and all that's happened right now. And it certainly has had a massive effect on us. So a lot of what you're seeing here is going to be coming straight from the heart. But I just real quick, I get really excited when I talk. Feel free to interrupt me if you have questions, and I'll certainly answer as many questions as I can at the end. So who am I? I am a video game veteran. I've been making video games now for over 30 years. If there's any sort of old school video game players here, I've created many original IPs. Blood Omen Legacy of Kain is, and the whole Legacy of Kain franchise is one of my first hits. I also worked on a series called Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem with Nintendo, where we broke the fourth wall, created an insanity system. I'm a huge H.P. Lovecraft fan. Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, I've worked on that with Kojima-san. I've done many games over the years. And I am back from the dead working on a game called Deadhaus Sonata, where the undead are fighting the living. And it is a narrative-driven action RPG where you play vampires, wraiths, revenants, ghouls, banshees in a very different setting. And so my background, just to give you an idea of how this talk is going to go, I've got a background in computer science, and I actually did a master's degree in computer science and artificial intelligence, user interfaces. I did a lot of neural network stuff. And I also, believe it or not, have a degree in phys ed. And despite all of these things, in video games, I'm known for telling stories. And Eternal Darkness, as an example, won the equivalent of an Academy Award for storytelling in the video game industry. So today, what I want to do is tell a story that hopefully will be interesting enough to sort of say how, at least myself, how I went from having absolutely no experience in AWS at all to becoming a hero in a period of 2 years. And it's literally what happens. And as I was saying earlier, I think a lot of people here are probably going to have a lot more experience in AWS than I will, per se. As a matter of fact, I spoke at, as an example, reInvent late last year when they asked me to speak at reInvent, at which time, I think just before I spoke, I became an AWS hero. I didn't even know what an AWS hero was, or have I ever heard of reInvent before, because my head's been in video games. And I certainly quickly learned how big the conference was and how exciting it was. And it was an honor and a pleasure to speak at it. But that's just to give you a background of some of the crazy things that happened over the past little while. So I've been in the video game industry for a super long time. I founded a company called Apocalypse Studios in 2018, before the pandemic. It is quite an ironic name, I know. And it was a typical startup. We had an office. We built a custom server. We bought the hard drives. It didn't have any kind of, matter of fact, we didn't want any power going into the graphics cards. We wanted it all going into the build machine where we do our daily builds. We had a local LAN. We wanted to create, the goal of Apocalypse Studios was to create games based in the cloud. And a significant shift has happened. And I'm going to talk, a lot of things I'm going to say are going to be broad sweeping generalizations. And although there may be some things that don't quite line up with what I say, I think by and large, please give me the benefit of the doubt at some level that what I'm saying is generally true. And so here's a really good one that will surprise probably a lot of people. Most people, when they think of video games, think of Call of Duty, I don't know, NHL hockey, all the big EA games, all those kind of things. Well, over the past several years, as a matter of fact, over the past 4 to 5 years, the video game industry has seen a significant shift in revenue where 86% of all global gaming revenue has gone to free to play. And all of the games that I just mentioned, like Madden or Call of Duty, all of these big games that you see advertised on all the consoles, they represent 10% of the industry. Free to play has been a massive shift that is basically cloud-based, where 86% of all the money in the world made in video games is now made this way. So knowing that the shift is occurring, I wanted to create games that really focused on this. Even though I didn't have that much, I had philosophically started talking about clouds a long time ago, many years ago, back in 2006. I wanted to take a cloud first approach, but I really didn't have any experience in AWS at all. And as a matter of fact, the first time I ever really used AWS myself is when we started our website. And I opened the panel for the first time in, I think, 2018. I was like, whoa, what is this thing? And I finally got through it and stuff like that. But I literally knew nothing, just so everyone's aware. But understanding clouds and the concept, the philosophical concepts behind clouds is extremely important. And to understand that, I want to start with something that I've been thinking about for my entire life. I'm a big Marshall McLuhan fan. And if anyone's going to go to the other talk that I'm having tomorrow, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the medium is the message. But the medium truly is the message when it comes to creating any kind of entertainment. And the medium now for video games is the cloud. It's not the PS5. It's not any other kind of platform. The medium now has switched to clouds, and I'll go into that more. But clouds have had a significant impact on games. And that significant impact on games is when you look at games like League of Legends, Path of Exile, Fortnite, these are all games where you have to log in to play. And that's very different from the single player experiences I used to make with Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, where you sit in front of a TV and it all comes at you, you put in your disc, and you can play and have that experience. That's the old world. And the current world is now all multiplayer based, where logging into the cloud pretty much has changed everything. It's all gone from buying these games from $60 to the free to play model, where you can play the game for free, but then at your option, you can purchase micro transactions for cosmetics. That's generally cosmetics, and sometimes it's got to do with gameplay, but most cases it's cosmetics. That's where all the financing is made, and that's where all the money is made. So it's really turned into something that is like a premium product, quite frankly, a commodity to a service model. And as we all know, clouds and service models, recurring revenue, that's where everything's at. So Anyway, that's a whole economic talk for another day. I'm happy to dive into some of that stuff if people want to talk about commoditization and why video games are actually really good and actually fight commoditization. But from a standpoint of looking at engines, this is where I first started looking into clouds. When we started the company, my previous companies, I've made engines, I've used engines before, and we just started looking at the marketplace. And we said, well, what's the best engine out there? We looked at all the engines, and quite frankly, it was the people at Amazon that really convinced us, after really kicking the tires on all the engines, where we thought, wow, they're really going down the right road. So first of all, Amazon Lumberyard is free, but that's really has not that big of an impact from a standpoint of when you're working on an engine in the video game industry, that engine is going to largely going to be the base of your success or failure. So you really got to choose carefully. Even so, when it comes to does one engine cost money, does one engine does not, that matters to a certain extent. But if you can't create a hit game with it, it's all for naught. So it doesn't matter. So it's really important that you pick the right engine. What we really liked about Lumberyard was it had the AAA rendering capability of all the best engines. It was really looked good when we started looking at it in 2018, but they were doing something that the other, quite frankly, other engines weren't doing. And that was like breaking it up into modular pieces where you could turn them on and turn them off. Now, Unity, which is another engine out there, does do that, but the rendering capabilities just were not competitive with Lumberyard when we analyzed them. So we decided that we're going to go with Lumberyard. And then as soon as we did that, we started meeting more and more Amazon people. And it's when I started getting introduced to Amazon Game Tech. Before that time, like I said, we started our website. We put it on AWS. We wanted to do that simply because we wanted to try the cloud out to make sure, we were practicing what we were preaching. And that's when we started really, dipping our toes in for the first time. I will say this, the key to community growth, particularly under the times of the pandemic, and I think we've gone through an event horizon, clouds are going to be the key for communities and communications moving forward, especially in video games. And I am going to talk about some of the unexplored potential that I think lies in the clouds. And as a matter of fact, I guess you can say I'm all in on it because Apocalypse is really creating a game. What's the best way to describe it? If you look at free-to-play games, which Deadhaus Sonata is free to play, if I say it's a narrative-driven action RPG, a lot of people will just say free-to-play and narrative-driven are oxymorons, simply because if you look at all the free-to-play games, there's pretty much no story in any of them. So what we're trying to do, and what I'm known for doing, is telling story. I'm going to talk about how clouds, I think, are really going to shift that. But I'm out there and there's not a lot of people doing, if any, doing what we're talking about doing here. So, all right. So I talked a little bit about this. So when it comes to Apocalypse, we're a typical office. We had a custom built server. We were running GitLabs with automated builds, running on a LAN, and a clean build. I'll just explain why we do clean builds every night. When you compile the code, whenever there's a change, we use source integrity, and everyone contributes to it. But oftentimes coming in the morning and compiling something could take as long as 2 hours to 3 hours, maybe longer. Our clean builds from beginning to end, where you compile everything from scratch to make sure you don't miss it, we're taking 7 to 8 hours a night, averaging 7 hours. We ran that nightly in a build. On our LAN, we had it automated. So people come in the morning, like the artist who didn't care about each particular code change, would just come in, download the build from the local LAN, just pull it down from source integrity, and then start working on their art assets. That's a really good process. It's pretty much what most of the video game industry does. And these clean builds are really important. And if you look at some mature games that are out there, games that are launched, some of these clean builds will take 72 to 48, like 48 to 72 hours. They take a really long time because you have to ensure that your integrity of all your assets are always working. So we're 6 to 8 hours actually isn't that long, but that's what we were doing in our LAN when we first started. So, and we were using GitLabs. We started using Git. So I'm going to fast forward now. I'm going to skip a lot of stuff. We pretty much stayed really small up until 2020. where we were really ramping up the graphic quality of our game. We created a trailer called Memento, Mori. I had several talks lined up at GDC. We had a playable demo all going, and this was literally coming in the middle of March. And during that, we just finished all the things that we needed to do. We had 20, 30 meetings lined up. GDC is the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco. It's something I've never missed. I've gone there every year for the last 30 years, and it's where a lot of business in the video game industry is done. And just as most of the office was taking a break, my CTO and myself, Yuri, were sitting down in the office. We were the only two there. And I started looking around at all of these insane things that were happening. They're almost too insane to be true, where the government's starting to say we might have to shut everything down. I was looking, is this looking like martial law? What are we going to do? Then they started canceling things. GDC got canceled just like a few days when we were getting ready to even bring a few more people, set up all these press interviews. And we realized that, if we don't do something, we're literally going to be unable to work. So we called up Amazon, a few people that we knew there, and we were lucky enough the year before to actually sit down and just blue sky what it would be like to put that build process that I talked about that took 7 to 8 hours. What would it be like to just move it all to the cloud? And wouldn't it be really cool if we moved this to the cloud so we didn't have to do it in a local LAN infrastructure? And we left there with some really cool ideas, but at the end of the day, it came down to, yeah, but we got to make our game and we don't have the time to really do this. So it just so happens that COVID-19 forced us. We looked at it and said, if we don't do this, we are dead in the water. Everyone's going to have to be laid off because we won't be able to work. And so we literally uploaded everything that we had to an S3, our entire source integrity, and then started working on this stuff. We were terrified because we had no idea what it would be like for people to work on modems pulling down this stuff. Would the last mile really kill us? We didn't have a lot of time, and we just pulled the trigger and we did it. And it took us about a week and a half to upload everything. We're just using non-commercial modems, or I guess quasi-commercial modems, but they weren't anything special. And I later found out that Amazon has special ways to upload a lot of data really quickly. But at the time, we had no idea. We were just going by the seat of our pants. So,
Dennis, question for you that came up in chat.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, what programming languages do you guys use? What are some of those code bases in?
Yeah, C++ generally is what we use. There's some scripting languages, Python and other script languages that we use, but for most of the programming, it's C++. Yes, that's mostly it. We C# we don't use that much, though some engines use C#. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, and interrupts, like I said, I get really hyper. So,
This is great stuff.
So when we looked at it, we're like, okay, how are we going to do this? So we basically worked with AWS, and we did the following. We moved everything to a S3 Git repository. All our game assets and code assets were uploaded in a week. As I said, we created a new Git server on an EC2. Now we did some custom scripting with GitLabs, and the automated build we're able to do with some of the scripting in there. So we wrote some custom code. I think we're going to release that out into the wild soon. So anyone else who wants to, look at something like this and want to get automated builds on the server, we'll be able to do it, because if we can help anyone, I think it's incumbent upon us as a society to try to help everyone try to, adjust to this new life of working from home and working remotely. It was such a shock to us. We explored several paths. We did a custom Lambda solution. All said and done, here is basically the framework that you see here and how we did things. But this was the crazy part. I think we spent about $15,000 on a custom server. Hey, we're a startup. You can spend a lot more on these custom build servers, but we didn't have that much money. And However, we found with the new AWS, we would scale the EC2 to be like 1,000 CPUs at the time when we're doing the actual build. It took the build down to 20 minutes. It cost us literally $2 in costs. And it went from, 6 to 7 hours to 20 minutes, where if you do that cost, it's way cheaper than building your own machine. And we found that some of the costs were reduced because if you keep things in the cloud in the right way, you don't get charged for transfer of information within Amazon itself. So it was incredibly cheap. And I would, when we first did this, I was like, are we going to be able to afford this? We didn't know, but we did know if we didn't do this, we wouldn't be able to work. So there was no choice. We were pushed off the cliff, and this is essentially what happened. So it was a huge, massive success. So usually you have the axiom of you can choose faster, better, cheaper. In this case, and you have to pick two of those, we're actually able to get all three. 7 hours, 20 minutes, super secure, fireproof, $700 a year cost versus just literally $15,000 for a server. We've just never looked back. And the funny thing is when we did all this, when I said to everyone, because everyone, has their gaming modems at home and no one was ready for this. So everyone took their machines from home. And I said, look, if you need a faster connection, the company will pay for that, and we'll help you pay for the cost, because you got to be able to work. It's super important. The last mile really terrified us. Not a single person upgraded ever. So we had someone new this year who joined us with a really terrible internet connection. So we insisted that they upgraded, and we're subsidizing that. But we have never really had to, frankly, non-commercial modems are fine for this work process. And so it was really quite stunning. So that happened in a matter of weeks. And it was so shocking. When I started talking about this, we started talking to the AWS folks as well. They were quite intrigued. We did deep dives with them. We showed them exactly how we did it. This eventually led to a blog that I posted that later became the talk at re:Invent, was all based upon this. And this was really moving our build infrastructure that was on a LAN to the cloud. And so the story is, at this point, this is where I became aware of an AWS hero. They said, would you like to be an AWS hero? I was like, I would love to. What is it? And this was while I was speaking at re:Invent, and I'd never heard of that before either. And then I started to realize the depth and the knowledge of what's out there, and why I say there's probably a lot more. People here probably know a lot more about the cloud, certainly, than I do. I make video games, but what I hope I can contribute, and what I hope I can bring some provocative statements, is just around the corner here, so bear with me. But it was quite a shock. But the story does not end here. This is very interesting. So as we ended 2020, some things are starting. Video games are doing very well in the pandemic. As a matter of fact, it's one of the few industries where games are doing really, really well. And we're working on some technology with Amazon, and we had to literally more than double in size. And we ended up working on something where we had to hire a lot of people over the Christmas break. We were literally interviewing people on Christmas Eve. This is how crazy it was. And imagining for us, we're very small still. We had to hire like 11 or 12 people in, a few weeks. And that part was very difficult, but we did very well. But here was the part that became really terrifying. We realized that we now had to start buying all these machines for people. And we're like, where are we going to get these machines? We don't even know if we can get them, because there is all the good graphical cards right now. Anyone who's like doing any kind of cryptocurrency, they're buying all the graphical cards up with all that compute time. And so come November, we started looking at these virtual machines, and we're working with a group in BC, and we're using their software. They're called Teradici, where they have what's called these where they have the software that it really works really well with the AWS infrastructure for zero clients and just software in general. So when we hired all these new people, we did not buy a single machine. And very much like March, where we had to jump off the cliff, or we were forced off the cliff, this time we jumped off the cliff. I would say we weren't really sure if this was the right move, but we were betting on it. We think it's going to work. So we started getting these Teradicci clients where the best way to describe it, we just brought a few more people on board, and they're starting to use these zero clients now. And a zero client is just basically a box where you plug in your keyboard and your monitor and your camera, whatever else you're using, whatever hardware peripherals you're using to communicate with people, but your compute power is all in the cloud. So it's literally a virtual machine on the cloud. And if you log into one of these things where you typically see your Windows bar on the bottom, what it really is you just get a double Windows bar, and the higher Windows bar is essentially the nesting in the virtual machine in the cloud. These things are described, the only way that our people say it is just like magic. You can't tell at all that you're on a virtual machine. And you can use all the software, whether it's Lumberyard, whether it's Maya. And we started buying virtual machines. And so when 75% of Apocalypse now is now running on VMs. We even had some people that had really beefy computers in the office want to go to a virtual cloud because the software is easier to set up. We can literally spin one up in 10 minutes that's got all the software we need on it, and you can install any other software just really easily. For all intents and purposes, it's like a machine, and at the same time, it's totally secure, as secure as we want to make it. You can set what people can save and what people don't. And as it sits right now, 75% of the people that are now working at Apocalypse, I haven't met in person. I've only met through calls like this. And if you would have asked me if that's going to be the case in 2018, I would have said, no way. Meeting someone in person and shaking their hand is what business is all about. I still think that there's really big advantages to doing that and closing deals that way. But I can say now that I'm a complete convert. You definitely don't need to do that. The cost of these virtual machines is $5,000 per year. And so if you have it is more expensive than just buying a machine, because if you buy a machine for $5,000 or $5,000 to $10,000, it's going to amortize over 3 years. So the value of that will probably last you 5 years. So if you divide that by 3, $5,000 per year is slightly more expensive. However, back at one of my previous companies where we had like 230 people, we had 4 full-time people. All they would do was build machines, debug people, fix their mice, all these kind of crazy hardware questions, where now we literally just push a button, spin a machine up, send it to someone. If we don't have to worry about backups, it's all backed up, it's all automated. It's just that infrastructure it's just changed everything for us. And we are talking to the animation industry in Toronto and other places across anywhere we can with the Canadian government, trying to urge them to say, this is the future, where you're not even buying hardware anymore, where you have sustainable, amazingly green footprint with these virtual machines. And our offices are in Niagara, but most of the people at Apocalypse are no longer in Niagara. So it's just this crazy change that I never would have thought that it was true. So yes, there are AWS workspaces. I'm trying to remember. I think for all intents and purposes, it's running through Teradicci with AWS workspaces. There's actually a talk where we first started seeing this stuff in late October. I'll try to link it in during this once I finish everything. But it was a presentation of someone using the Unreal Engine on one of these virtual stations, and they described it the same way. It's like magic. And that's what everyone thinks. It's incredible. So super easy to set up. There's not a lot to it. And we use the Teradicci. You pay for these things by the minute. And where the Teradicci software comes in case you're wondering, is when people log out, it stops charging you for the compute time. So you literally only get charged for each minute on what you use these machines on. So yeah, so that's what that is. Okay.
Another quick question.
Yeah.
So from being fully on-prem, like everything was on-prem to fully in the cloud, including the workstations? What was that time window? How long did that process take?
2 weeks.
No.
Yeah. And 1 week to upload, another week to get everything working. Like, don't get me wrong. We're working all the time to set everything up. We did it in 2 weeks because we had to. So people were literally, it happened so fast that people were on a break before we went to GDC getting canceled. And by time we called everyone back into the office for a final meeting, we were no longer allowed because of the pandemic lockdown. You weren't allowed to gather in that many. So then we went from what we thought was going to be our last company meeting to whenever lasted the pandemic to literally meeting everyone in quarantine, sort of one step at a time, being like super safe, making sure people would get their equipment out one at a time. So it was literally 2 weeks, the whole thing.
Wow. That's amazing.
It was very scary, but we did it. So it was quite an experience. So, but here's where I think where thinking about clouds really starts coming into, really, I think will start affecting us all. And Deloitte predictions, I'm a big fan of this particular talk. They do it every year. And I pulled some of it. I recommend going to their website. You can download the PDF where they talk about all their predictions. But on-premises computing dropped from 59% in 2019 to 38% in 2021. So when you think about it, what that meant was most offices had all their computing in the office. And once the pandemic hit, it completely flipped, where now most companies in the world now, their computing is now in the cloud. And that's never going to go back as far as we know. I've talked to so many other people. We still have our office. We're using it for storage right now, but I think we're going to permanently close it down. The company voted that they didn't really ever want to return, except for social gatherings to have beers and meet everyone. But otherwise, it's going to become quite a challenge now because some people are thousands of miles away. It's not like we used to be where people would fly to Niagara, think about joining the company, think about the big move. None of that matters anymore. So, but that's the only reason we'd ever think of having bricks and mortar now. So it's quite huge. So I think that's going to affect every single industry in the world. And I don't think we're ever going back. I think some companies may want to go back. I just think the wins are too big, not having to pay for rent, having if people have to work late, the quality of life of working late and just rolling into bed and not having to worry about driving or commuting or that is just so powerful. Even when the pandemic lifts up and people are free to do whatever they want, I still think working at home is going to win over everything else. That's my personal opinion, but I guess time will tell. Okay, let's go to the next slide here. So ever since that, as everyone can probably all imagine, we're all in on AWS. There's so many things we're doing on AWS now. As a matter of fact, one of the advantages that we think we have, where at one point knowing nothing about AWS to now knowing so much about it and how all the different infrastructure works, we're putting things together in a way that we think a lot of people haven't really thought about. And it's not that we're creating all of these new ideas, because these ideas are out there. It's like bringing these ideas together in a holistic fashion. And I find that in today's world, if you can think holistically, despite the fact that there's all of these different silos, you can really get some pretty serious advantages. And I'm going to talk about some of those now. I'm going to throw out some of these philosophies, but we're all in on, you just name it now. We're doing so many things with AWS that we never would have done before. And I think that these are really only the beginning of where we're going. So let me start giving some examples of how this is. And this is something I'm particularly excited about. And I think this is one of the first ways that I think gaming is going to change. And when we talk about video games, basically, when I would say create a game back in the early 1990s, and if you look at Eternal Darkness, released 2004, and all the other what I would say AAA narrative-based games that I create, that was really the single-player era. And today we're in the multiplayer era, where really the multiplayer games themselves are essentially cloud-based. They're all free to play, but now we've got esports, and we have so many different ways in which streamers are jumping in, and it's really the multiplayer age. But now we have esports. All these things are changing. It's so massive. The economics have flipped on its head. We're now free to play is now 86% of all global gaming revenue. That is such a massive shift over the past few years. I can't even emphasize how it's really, really challenging companies to reinvent themselves. But where I think we're going, and where I think everything is going to go towards meta player games. And that is games that you can play that are outside of the game itself. So imagine this. What if I was to say to you, we have the ability, that's my cat snoring, by the way, I'm so sorry. In the pandemic, here's another little story. I'll get back to the meta player stuff. We had 3 cats at the office. I'm a big cat fan, and I had 3 cats at home. And when the pandemic hit, we had to take all the cats from the office to our house, and now we have 6 cats. So there could be some cats jumping on my lap during this call, and one of the cats is snoring very heavily. Oh, my wife is grabbing her. So
we are very pro cat on this channel, so that's perfectly awesome.
I am so sorry. It was so loud. I was like, oh wow. So anyway,
we couldn't hear it. No.
Oh, problem. You couldn't hear it? Okay. My apologies. Anyway, meta player. What if I was to say to you, if you have 1,000 people watching your game as you stream, what if I was to say to you, we can embed code, people who are watching on Twitch, to play your game without even having it? So we're embedding code in the stream so that they're part of the process, even though they don't even have your game. Well, we're doing demos of this right now. And we're partnered with a company called GenVid, amazing company. They've written the underlying architecture. So what we're doing right now is we're embedding code in our games, which we're calling metagaming, where you can have a lot of people watching you play a game as you stream. They can jump in, augment the gameplay, even though they're watching through a stream, real time, and interact with things. It's like bringing people back to the early days of the Greek theater so they can actually play your game without having it. And that's all to do with this new medium of people watching people play games. It's mind-boggling. It's really cool. And I've actually done a talk on that. I'm happy to send the links. That was a GDC talk I did last year, and we're doing crazier and crazy things. Imagine watching a stream, taking over a character in game, and real-time LARPing. These are some of the things we can do. And this is all because of the cloud. Think about the narrative implications of storytelling, where you can have people from all over the world jumping in and participating in the story. So that's just one of the ways that I think cloud computing is really going to change things. Another thing that we're doing in Deadhaus Sonata is we have the concept of ages. We're going to launch, when we launch the game, we're going to launch something called the first age. And what we're doing, and I said earlier, when people talk about narratives and narrative-driven games, we're really big believers in narrative, but most people will say free-to-play game and narrative is an oxymoron. What are you doing? As a matter of fact, most time when we talk about Deadhaus Sonata, despite the fact that I'm known for doing very well-respected narrative-driven games, really strong story, we'll say, hey, Deadhaus Sonata, we'll talk about people really interested and say, oh, free-to-play, I'm out. I'm not doing that. There's no story in free-to-play games. We have that uphill battle all the time. But imagine if we started using things like big data and we started storing all the adventures that people did online in the cloud. Imagine it's like an age rather than an alpha, where you start categorizing all this big data, not to get necessarily information on sales or anything like that, but to log stories and to build a Similarian-like history in your world. It's kind of like combining Dwarf Fortress and persistent online universes in a way that everyone can, I guess, contributes to that overall narrative. And that's what ages are. So the idea is, let's have a persistent universe where we store everything that everyone does and be able to extract that data and tell stories to everyone else. By the time you get to the second age, the third age, and the fourth age, people are telling stories about that long forgotten era. Imagine crafting a weapon that, it's okay in the first age, but by the time you get to the seventh age, it is this epic, magical pocket universe weapon that has been created that can only have been done through all of that history and all of its exploits over time. Those are the kind of story narrative things that we can do with the cloud that you can absolutely not do with a single player game where all of that story is on a disc and you play by yourself. So these are the kind of things that we're really exploring. And these are the kind of things that I think are going to be really game changing for the video game industry. We're doing some other things too. Community driven content. I'm a big believer in this. And I'm a huge movie, television, film, book buff. And I'm going to use an example of something gone bad that's going to, I think, a lesson to make everything go really, really well for us in the future. And I'm going to use the Game of Thrones series on YouTube. And I think it's a really interesting experiment on how some things have changed and how if you don't pay attention, they can go really, really poorly. So Game of Thrones, of course, a big fan of the book series. Wish they would get done. Really looking forward to when they do. The TV series was absolutely phenomenal of, the 4th or 5th seasons. And this really interesting phenomenon of the community and the internet started happening where you had this community of people on YouTube and other streaming networks where people would start to give ideas. By the time the first or second year when came around for Game of Thrones, there were several YouTube channels that later turned into thousands where people started speculating on where the story was going to go, where they thought it was going to be. And of the 3rd or 4th year, I remember George R.R. Martin, the author of the series, saying, these guys are starting to guess where I'm going. And they're coming up with, in some cases, better ideas than I had. And you started seeing with these ideas in the community on YouTube and people trying to strategize what character is going to fight off against what character, how it's all going to end, you started having thousands of people contribute to this story and narrative. And by and large, a lot of it was just terrible. It was just terrible ideas. But the ideas that were really good gained gravity, I would say, where others started contributing to that. And then suddenly you had millions of people contributing to these pretty solid ideas. And despite the fact that the series itself fell over the cliff in such a way that, I think it ended really poorly, and the showrunners did not have a chance to compete against these millions of people, what that really says is another thing about metagaming or meta storytelling is when you have so many fans, if they're contributing to the content in such a way, regardless of how good the average is, you're going to get some people that are going to create these awesome nuggets that are going to gravitate towards other smart people, and they're going to start building these plot lines that someone like myself or the showrunners or George R.R. Martin absolutely cannot compete with. So whether all the theories are, hey, the showrunners wanted to go work on Star Wars, or they just wanted to leave the series, it was too long, they were too tired, or George R.R. Martin didn't finish the series, I think those are all possibilities of why the series didn't do so well. But I think the real reason is they tried to compete against the fan base and they had no chance. So when you look at that and see that, well, that could be a problem or an opportunity, I think it's a massive opportunity. So one of the things we're doing is we're opening up tools like World Anvil, which is a it's a world building tool essentially to create stories, and Project Deos, which is integrated into World Anvil, where you can literally create maps, do your own dungeons. We're putting that all online and to integrate with Deadhaus Sonata. So people who want to play the game will literally be able to create their own adventures in the game. And we think if our user base is large enough and we have enough people who are contributing, that kind of meta storytelling will actually make our game significantly better. And it's not just of, hey, come work for us for free. We're going to open up basically stores where people can sell their content, whether it be $1 for $10, whatever they think it's worth. And so they can actually make money by contributing content to the game. That's the idea of where we want to go. And I think that's going to be the future of gaming. Once again, only can be done through clouds, only can be done through cloud infrastructure, cloud maintenance, and doing integrations from these different cloud tools into our cloud tools. And I think that when it comes to narrative and storytelling, not previously possible before in the older generations. And now I'm going to talk about the holy grail of RPGs, which is, imagine if you take all this data and you started sifting through all this stuff with the Cimmerillion, all this community created content, all this LARPing that we're doing with the meta entertainment and the, streaming integration. We can actually sift it down and start doing procedurally generated story and procedurally generated cinema. We're now starting to see text to speech that's passing the Turing test. Some of the stuff is incredible. And now we also have, and we're partnered with another group that does something called voice skinning, where they can record someone for a couple hours. And if you want to sound like Gandalf, you can play a procedurally generated voice, put on the voice skinning, they sound like Gandalf. And so now you're literally at the point of, you can write a story down, our story can be generated, and suddenly have real-time actors with real-time procedurally generated circumstances. And then we have the holy grail of RPGs, where we have a living, breathing, procedurally generated, community-created environment that's only possible through the cloud. And these are the kind of ideas that Apocalypse is thinking about. And when I say the journey from AWS from zero to hero, I absolutely could not have been thinking this way without our exposure to AWS and to clouds. And it has profoundly changed the way I think. It has profoundly changed the way I think about game design. And I think it is an event horizon for all the things that are to come. And it is so exciting for me personally, whether we succeed or someone else succeeds at this. This is some exciting stuff. And I think it's, I think it's the future. So anyway, that is the story from zero to AWS Hero. I hope that threw some ideas out there that people are thinking about, and I'm happy to take as many questions as people want to hear me answer.
That was awesome. Thank you very much. Lots of different interesting parts of AWS that I hadn't thought to use it in the ways that you had described there. For myself personally, I know I'm a big, passionate serverless developer and using some of those tools, but it was really cool to hear some of the solutions you guys have. One of the things you mentioned was S3 bucket for Git. That was the first time I had heard about that. I know AWS has a native service for source control. Just curious a little bit about how you ended up using S3 for your source control there.
So with video games and source control, we use S3 largely for the LFS files. Where video games is very different than most source integrity is we have a massive amount of just digital files that you just have to. So basically, at first, we just moved everything up into S3, back to everything up as if everything was gonna, in case everything burned to the ground. And then we moved the GitLabs server. We love GitLabs. It's great. It's a great server and great software. We moved the source integrity to an EC2, and then put all the data in LFS was stayed in S3, but the entire backups were in S3.
Okay, that was the missing piece for me. I did some Googling on the side. It looks like there are ways to use S3 as your Git interface without any other EC2s or anything like that. So I was curious to hear more about that, but thank you for clarifying that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Sorry if I wasn't clear.
So I definitely want to have a conversation with you offline about using AWS workspaces. It's a longer conversation, and hopefully I might be able to save you a lot of money. We'll see about that because we've been playing with workstation and AppStream, and some of the leverages of AppStream, but that's for after the recording stops.
Would love to talk about it for sure. Absolutely, always more to learn.
Yeah. So the concept of the procedurally, I mean, I don't know how far away we want to get away from gaming and just like talk about like the coolness of the thought process, but like I'm gonna call it crowdsourcing. The crowdsourcing of game development is something that a lot of folks have been trying to capture, but I think you're making it something that the person making the additional content can actually make some money off of. I think that's something that a lot of people have not been doing. Like you can go out there and find all kinds of Minecraft plugins and all kinds of stuff that people have just been doing because they love the game. And but if they could do that plus make money off of it, I think that you'd be drawing in a lot more of the professional level type people that aren't just doing it on a lark. So that'll be fascinating to keep an eye on.
Yeah, we absolutely. I think I'm always worried about doing things that aren't, you never want to exploit people. And a lot of these community driven experiments in the video game industry boil down to, hey, come work for free for us.
Right.
And, when it comes to doing mods and, people will do mods in the hope that they'll get picked up at a games company. Well, why not just create a marketplace where they can sell and just create an economy for them? And there's no, from our standpoint, really, it's going to be the server costs and the infrastructure and the monitoring of that stuff, which we would have had to do anyway. And if you can empower people to make money, that's a pretty good motivator on top of being able to create, because that's what artists do, right? Imagine you can create and actually get paid for your creations. That's where, I guess when it comes down to it, and I'll talk a lot about this tomorrow, but we always try to put ourselves in the position of, flip the chessboard around. And if you have a gamer, how would you feel as that gamer? And I'd be like, well, I could tell a lot of stories, but if I'm going to tell all these stories, I'm putting all my effort in, why don't I just make my own game? Well, if you don't have the time to do that and you can use this infrastructure and you can get paid for it, I'd be like, I'll do that. And, so yeah, absolutely. That was the feeling behind that. And there are some groups that do it, but most don't. Most just don't pay people for it.
Yeah, because if you look at the modding community around Team Fortress and Skyrim and Morrowind and all that stuff, those guys aren't getting paid anything, yet they're making some of the best content that's available for those games. Yes. And if you can take that passion and actually bump it up a level and have those guys do something that they're gonna like make a living off of, holy mackerel, that would be that. I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, it would be a win for everyone. It's certainly, if someone, so as an example, someone created something that sold, I don't know, say 1 million of units of whatever they built, that'd be tremendous for us because they're contributing something that people love in our game.
Right.
And they're making money from it too. We don't even have to worry about how can we compensate this person. Maybe we'll hire them full time and all of that kind of stuff. But still, it's just a win no matter what. So
right,
yeah.
and it gives you a fertile hiring ground. You just like skim all the 5-star mod references off the, and like you can hire him, hire her, hire him, hire her.
It is we all rise with the tide scenario, which are the things that we always try to shoot for. And I think it's very ethical, and I think quite frankly, because of the pandemic, we're seeing a lot of people being displaced. So here's a way in which, I'm going to talk about how to get into the game industry tomorrow, but these are just one of the examples of what people can do, if their previous jobs are essentially gone right now because of the pandemic. So, yeah.
Yeah, for the folks in the audience, if anybody's interested, tomorrow night, Dennis is going to be talking on my other show, V Brown Bag. And we're doing a career series on V Brown Bag on how to get into different parts of the industry, whether it's mid-career or early career or transition. And he's going to be talking about getting into the gaming world. So that's going to be super fun as well.
I gotta say, Chris, did you pay Dennis to keep plugging that? I think that I think there were about 4 or 5 different references to it. So that was some good cross coordination there.
Look, I bring people from there here. I bring people from here there. It's cross-pollinating.
That's the thing about knowing Chris is she's never going to bring you down to just one thing. It's always the whole array of events that he's got. So
Dennis said, line me up for whatever. I was like, sold. He didn't know what he got himself into.
You did 3 talks. That's okay. I love doing this. As I like interacting, and I hope anyway, a couple things, I get a chance to tell our story, but on top of that, the goal is if we can talk about some provocative things, which hopefully I have today, to have these ideas float around and maybe percolate and create something else for other people working in these spaces, I think is really good for us all. So.
Agreed, definitely.
So Dennis, in hindsight, would you use a snowball in the future for all that data you had?
Oh, yeah. So let me get, it's the snowball is that the hardware piece where it just uploads to AWS right away?
Yeah, that's
It's
the
the portable box that
70 terabyte
you
server.
use.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. Yes. It literally was a week of, is it uploaded yet? How about now? How about now? It was a nightmare. And after we did all that, when we're talking to some AWS people, they told us about the snowball, and I had forgotten the name, but I was like, wow. So yes, 100%. It even, I don't even know how much they cost. I don't think they're that expensive, but
Oh, they're big bucks. Anywhere from a bread box to a tractor trailer truck. It depends which one you want. So.
yeah, we didn't price it out, but I'll tell you, if it could have done it in a day, we probably would have done it, because waiting a week, because it could be error prone. We're uploading an entire database that literally takes a week. That's a terrifying experience. We were doing other things in parallel, like setting things up, but we would have paid for that. I'm pretty sure.
So Dennis, one quick question. If we can get that link to the workspaces talk that you did, I will definitely make sure that I put that in the show notes as well, so that folks watching this can see that as well.
Yeah, I will work on that as questions are.
I'll remind you afterwards. That's fine.
Okay, cool.
And for anyone who's here and hasn't filled out the survey link, myself and Chris have dropped it in chat. He gave you the hyperlink because he's nice like that. One click, you can fill that out. That survey will enter you into a raffle to win some AWS compute credits. So if you want to start building your own games on AWS, we can do it. We can save you a couple of dollars. I don't know how far you'll get with $25, but
more than you would think. It's surprise. It's $25 goes a long way.
Yep.
Not with personally, my workspace experience has been that's the most expensive AWS service I find myself using workspaces. So
you gotta flip over to AppStream or use Cloud9, one of the two. Except for Steve. Steve doesn't win. If Steve puts in, then he's not going to win.
Oh, he's just filling the thing out. Damn it. Damn it.
How long you been lurking down there, Steve?
Man, I should have signed it as someone else. Shoot.
Conan T. Barbarian? Who's that?
I arrived just a few minutes late. Apologize for that.
Yeah, no worries.
Dennis, I'm one of the other organizers. This is really, really fun. Actually, I thought about dragging my son out of his room to come down and listen to it. But
well, there'll be the one tomorrow. If he wants to be in the game industry, have him come tomorrow. Because then yeah, for sure.
I think I will. Yeah, I'll have to join that thing. What's it called? Brown bag, Chris? I don't know. Just kidding. I'll watch the recording and I'll get it off of that.
Cool. All right. Well, if anybody else has any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask a question. Otherwise, okay. Yep. Right, Dave. Not a question, just a statement. But if anybody else doesn't have any additional questions, Mr. Planky, how many submissions do we have?
we are up to 7, which is a little over 50%. So I think that we could do it. People's odds are strong right now.
Gina can't win either.
Oh, all right. Well,
she's out. The sandal's gonna fly over your head.
All right. So I will share my screen here. What happened? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't have a row 1, but I have an 8. All right.
Oh, no sound effect this time.
Yeah. All right. Jade, I will send you an email. I'm not going to read your whole email address out for the recording, but I will send you an email at the end of this. You won tonight's credit.
Congratulations, Mr. DeSolme.
Cool.
Yay.
Thank you.
Awesome. You know what? We'll do one more just for fun. Why not? We got plenty, and we appreciate everyone who filled out the form. So. And Scott. I will send you an email as well at the end of this. Those were our two winners. So thank you for everyone who showed up tonight. Thank you to Dennis for presenting, and thank you to everyone who filled out the feedback form.
Awesome.